The shift comes the moment you start thinking about this entire process, asking for yourself as an act of service. Namely, in two ways. One is me serving at my highest level is not just great for me, it's great for the rest of the world, right? So somebody else is better off if I ask or say, I want to do these things because I'm serving them at a higher level, I'm providing more value, having more impact, etc., right? So it's good for the other person. What I teach in this communication framework, right, is to also, at a smaller level almost, within the conversation, to focus on the other side. So not to talk about, this is what I'm great at, this is what I want to do, this is what you want to ask me or, hire me for, etc. But instead to focus wildly on the other side. So to get really curious about what are the challenges that the person that you're talking to, right, and potentially hoping to work with, and what are the challenges that they're struggling with and what are they hoping to achieve. And if you understand those 2 points, right, then you can figure out for yourself, how can I serve them?
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never-Ending Climb for Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, we have the great pleasure of being joined by Wies Bratby. And Wies has a remarkable role in this world in helping to coach, mentor women in their careers by bringing together negotiations and all of these other elements to really help reinforce and foster women of agency. Wies, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sean, for the invite. I'm really happy to be here.
I am imagining that there's a lot of women and men that are out there that are working through careers. Right? This is often one of those questions that starts when we're tiny. What do you want to be when you grow up? And most of us have no idea. And then you have ideas, and then, like any of the plans, it doesn't survive first contact with reality. Sometimes I think that there's these shifts that we have to make to think about how we approach, how we think about the mindset, the way that we go about standing out so that we can create the careers that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you have there? Because I feel like this is one of those things. To build the career that you want, there is a need to stand out somehow.
Yeah, for sure, I would agree. That makes it easier, at least, right, to do very well in your career. It makes it a whole lot easier to communicate why people would pick you, obviously, versus all the other 900 candidates for a certain role, for example. So yeah, I would argue though, Sean, that it's before we can get to the question of, communicating to other people what it is that you're great at, you first need to know yourself truly, what you're great at and what you would love doing with this one short life that we've all been given, right? And so I think before we get to the fun part of how do I communicate to others what I can do for them, I think it's important to really truly own what am I great at? And what do I enjoy doing? Which then sort of channels the energy that you have into the right direction so that you actually have this conversation about, hey, I can do all these wonderful things for you with the right people. Because wouldn't it suck if you have not enough information about what you're really great at and what you really enjoy doing, and so you're going in the wrong direction, right? That is actually an experience that a lot of people find they're having, at the age of, a couple of years into your career, and you're looking around, you're like, this is what I worked so hard for, right? This is what my parents told me to do, or, what I believed was the path for me. And I don't know about you, but I often, when I go to parties and I talk to people about their careers, it's the first question, right? What do you do? And people not very often do you talk to people who light up when they talk about, their work. Very often it's like, well, they describe what they do, and sometimes they're, neutral or mildly enthusiastic. But I have found, unfortunately, and I say this with no love, right, that the majority of people that you ask about their careers are not that genuinely enthusiastic about what they do. And I think that's the bigger piece to address, right, before you can get to how can I stand out in what I do? It's just making sure that at the foundation of that, right, at the bottom of it, so to say, that you are starting off on the right track.
What I really love about that is the advice that people keep hearing is, well, if you want to move up, you got to stand out. You got to be noticed. And naturally, then we need to be noticed for the right things. But to be
Yeah.
noticed, the other thing that a lot of the best leaders will see immediately is whether or not what you're talking about is something that's really you or whether it's
Yeah.
performative. And I
Yeah.
think this is one
Agree.
of the do what you love. Yes. Although there's, if I did, what I originally thought I was going to love, I was probably out going making sure that people didn't catch too many fish or that they were behaving themselves in the
Yeah.
mountains, right? But then you find out that there's other elements of the job that maybe don't align with other parts of life or other goals that you may have. And
Right.
if I think about the idea that when you know what you love and you're good at, you just start to shine in this really wonderful way because you
Yeah.
light up and you bring that energy, that positive energy, as opposed to
Mhm.
the alternative is more of a I have to, right? And so this leaning into what you love and you're good at, I'm hearing echoes as you're saying this of a conversation I had with somebody at my team just a few weeks ago of
Mhm.
needing to really think about what do you love and what are you good at. And maybe you wanted to
Mhm.
go here, but if you love and you're good at this, isn't this going to be more fun and you're going to enjoy it more? And doesn't that just
And you're gonna be better at
right?
it. Yeah.
It
100%. Yeah, like co-signing on all of
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah. The idea of standing out in so many ways is something that risks being very performative. And I think this staying true to where you're coming
Yeah.
from, what you're good at. I know we were talking earlier about how I know it's always best if I don't have to do accounting. It sounds like you can relate to
Yeah.
this. And I think, right, knowing this about
Yeah.
ourselves can lead us in those decisions to navigate things. I think that it's this, what do I do, right? And the answer is not going to come from outside. And this is often an uncomfortable realization for people that they will need to look inside themselves to figure that out.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, no, that's my experience as well, is that there is no great big answer, outside of you. There's not somebody who's going to take you by the hand and whisper in your ear, what all the answers are. You do have them inside of you. That's, of course, the good news. But you need to allow that voice, right, within yourself to be heard. You need to allow yourself to really listen to that. And I do think, though, that I believe it starts there. I call it with my clients, I talk about following your energy. And it sounds a bit woohoo, but what I mean really is that, what we're just talking about, that something is released in the air when you love what you do, when you get excited about it, when you're genuinely, right, enthusiastic about it, that you can't like create in any other way. And I really believe that that zone of genius is where you do your best work and you provide the highest value to this world. So I believe not just for selfish reasons, right, that you should follow your energy. Like it's way more fun to do work that you love than that you dread going to, obviously. I think it's also better for the world. I think it's better for others. I think everybody's served when that happens. I think though that you were saying, well, the answer is within yourself. And I agree with that. Like I said, I think that's a starting point. I do, though, believe that there is a role for the outside world. And that is my particular method, right? The communication framework that I have developed that I teach to my clients that gets them all these wonderful results that they get is based on the idea that it's in the engagement with others, in the conversation with others, that you're kind of testing, what you're feeling inside. Because it's not just a question, what do I love and what am I great at? It's also a question, what does the world need, right? Of me or in general, maybe. And so it is my belief and my, well, it's not a belief at this point anymore with the results that we've gotten, but the way that I've set up my framework is that in this engagement with others, in the conversation with others, that you learn whether or not there is a need in that industry, company, team type of role, right? That you're interested in pursuing, if there's a need for your particular, talents and skill set and expertise that you bring. And so it starts, I believe, within you, right? That's the origin of everything, every success here. But it's in that testing with the other to really sort of hone in on what is the destination, what is it that I should really go for.
I think that that testing and that feedback and some of the best coaches and mentors
Hmm.
end up holding up a bit of a mirror in helping somebody see or discover or
Yeah.
understand something about themselves that they either maybe have an inclination about or
Hmm.
perhaps have not yet gotten to the point where they're ready for it. There's often that
Hmm.
navigation that comes through a set of
Yeah.
beliefs that are holding somebody back, right? There's so many studies about how when you hold a belief, it becomes a hard filter
Hmm.
to prevent you from even seeing some of the options that are out
100%.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is one of the greatest joys that I know I'm sure we both have had is that
Hmm.
there are ways to help team members with
Hmm.
these really hard things. But sometimes the most rewarding thing that we can do as a coach or mentor is help them see something in themselves that they've been blocking out or ruling out that suddenly becomes possible. And it's one of the most exciting things in the world.
Yeah. Agreed.
When you're
Agreed.
talking through that navigation with somebody, what are some of the top
Hmm.
few things, or what would you invite them to consider around how to evaluate their career
You mean what they've done so far, or what it is that they want to do?
and their decision? Yeah, there's always the how they got here, which is kind of interesting,
Hmm.
but the from
Hmm.
here, now what?
Yeah, I think I always say that my gift in this world, if that's not too big a word to use, but the one thing I'm better at than a lot of other people is the fact I see talent. I'm really good at spotting talent. And so what it means is that for my clients, I often see what they're capable of well before they see it. So my ambitions are often much higher and much bigger for them than they are for themselves at the start, right, of working together. And then as we progress, their eyes open to quite what they're capable of through the work that we do. And a lot of the work that we do, I always say 80% of the work that I do with my clients is mindset work, right? Is not skill based. That's a part of it and it's necessary. But before they can negotiate, which is the piece, right? Or before they can, let's just say, strategically communicate, what they're capable of, like the skill piece, if they don't understand quite what they're capable of. Their mindset, so to say, their confidence hasn't adapted to the reality of what they are actually capable of, right? They're not going to push for it. So we can have all the
Yeah.
skills in the world. It's all going to be, yeah, like the effect of it's going to be limited if they're just continuing to operate at the lower level than they're capable of, right? So a lot of this work, like I said, is mindset work. If we're talking about evaluating, I guess where they can go, it is a matter of undoing the limiting beliefs that the neural pathways that are well trodden in their brain, right, about what they think they can do. So it's really sort of unpicking all of that. And we have fantastic exercises to really shift people's understanding of these beliefs and replacing them basically with much more helpful beliefs. And so that's the starting point. But it's a process, right? I mean, it's not like, oh, this moment I'm believing this thing, and then 3 seconds later I'm like, oh my goodness, my world, like it takes time. It's life
It takes
homework,
time.
as we
It
say,
really does.
right? I'm still working on or through limiting beliefs on a weekly basis myself, and I've been doing this work for what is now decades, right? So that's an ongoing process. Um, However, I think a lot of the understanding of what they're capable of is coming through both this work, right? At the same like this undoing of limiting beliefs. So really opening their eyes to what they're capable of. And it's together with the information gathering or the exploring, as I often call it, of these possibilities in the real world, right? Which is through these conversations with the right stakeholders where they're gathering the data, the intelligence of, is there a need for me in this new right direction that I'm considering going in. And if you consistently do that work, right, both the undoing of limiting beliefs, the building of real confidence, also incidentally, the embracing of your inner idiot, as I call it, which is sort of the counterweight to owning your greatness, is also owning the fact that you suck in many ways, which we all do
Yeah.
as human beings. And I think if you bring those two together, you've got a really powerful recipe. Is what I see for my women, right? Because as long as you feel that, imposter syndrome, it's one of those, sort of catchphrases that is used and thrown around all the time at the moment, but it really stands for, especially for women, right? The issue of feeling like you're cheating and you're not quite as good as other people believe that you are, and that you're going to be found out. And that's going to hinder you tremendously for the rest of your career. If you constantly feel like you can be found out, right? You're wasting your energy, basically. So embracing your inner idiot means that you no longer have to waste that energy on upholding some kind of image about yourself. And that releases a lot of energy for then doing great work. Anyway, so my point being, right, if you do...
I'm 100% with you. And there are so many people that need to hear that and really listen to it.
This
right?
is actually, this is not the concept of the inner idiot. I'd love to claim credit for it. I cannot. It was Erasmus back in 1511 who wrote a book called, the English translation would be In Praise of Folly. Don't recommend reading it. I did the work for you. It's a little bit heavy. However, he already wrote about this, right? He wrote about how noblemen at the time and the kings of the world, right? How they were upholding an image of themselves to the rest of the world that, isn't tenable, because as human beings, we have our foibles, we have our weirdnesses, idiosyncrasies, right? In a stronger or lesser degree, but we all do. And I think today's, image of that would be social media, where we show a picture of our best days, right? Us on our best days, in our best times. We don't really show ourselves, in a corner crying, basically, with snot everywhere. So, but as long as you feel that, people praise you, right? What I see for my clients. We're going a bit off piece here, Sean. I hope you're okay with that. I find it wildly interesting.
Oh, this is you shining your light, Wies. This is the whole point of
I love it.
this. And
Great.
what I would add is that on what I refer to as the never-ending climb, to build a better you, to be that person, to create the change in the world, there's a few things that I think are really, really key in what you've pointed out, right? One is we're all going to do so much more for others than we do for ourselves.
Yeah.
And you were talking about what the world needs. And when you anchor on that, it is a selfless, it is a kind of I'll call it the light energy. It is the right place to start from for so many of the other decisions. And so keep going, Wies, because I'm like, yeah, high five, go.
No, this is like, in order for you to shine your light in this world, right? Do your magic, whatever you want to call it, which is the best version of you out there, which is great for you and great for the world, to my earlier point, right? You need to not be held back by the idea, it's all a ruse, right? If you guys knew about this part of me, you wouldn't actually be, you wouldn't allow me to, to do this thing.
Gotta let that go.
So it's and this is something that we see especially for women, and I'm sure a lot of men suffer from this as well, but it's handicapping, right? If you feel that it's not, the praise that you are receiving for that magic you're doing in the world isn't really fair, because what you're saying is, but you don't know the bits about me that aren't so great, that I'm not showing on social media and in this world, right? The noblemen and the princes and the kings that Erasmus was talking about, right? They're always dressed up fancy. They never show the nasty pieces. If you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't show that part of me, but it's there, right? You've got first rung seats to your own craziness, basically. Then you're always going to limit yourself, because you're not going to accept the praise, because you say, well, it's not true. It's at least not the full picture. You guys don't know how much I suck. And you're going to waste a lot of energy on hiding, all the ways in which you're weird, because you don't want the world to see that, because what are they going to believe then? And my idea and what I teach my client is embrace the suck. Embrace all the ways in which you're weird. You're crazy. I'm crazy. We're all freaking crazy in our own unique way. And what's actually really interesting is when you do that, right, you get comfortable with all the ways in which you're weird, and you start sharing it with other people, which is sort of the next level, right? You start sharing it. What is so hilarious is I often get my clients that come back completely disillusioned. They're like, nobody cares. They're like, turns out nobody, cares about all these weird things. I had the first time I talked about this was at an event with my clients. We had about 125, I think, women in the room. And I hadn't met a lot of these people in real life because all the work that I do is online, right, with women across the world. We had all gathered in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. And so I'm walking into the room. First time I'm seeing these people. I'm doing my intro. Hello. Great that we're here together. And I'm talking to them about the inner idiot, right? And so I share a list, I kid you not, like 2 pages full of all the ways in which I'm weird. I'm like, this is a circle of trust, right? We're going to get to know each other really well today. Let's start right here. And so I shared with them all the ways in which I'm weird. And then there was just this pure freaking love in the room. And then I asked all of them to do exactly the same as I did with their next door neighbor. And it was hilarious. It was so funny because it was all like, okay, whatever. Like nobody cared about, they thought they had all these, right, really, oh my goodness, these strong feelings. And then as it turned out, right, it was no big deal for any of it.
Yeah.
And the release of energy, the relief as well, right? Of, oh, apparently this is not so bad, or this isn't terrible, doesn't make me an awful human being at all. It's just like, oh, okay, whatevs, right? Is just it's a major factor in why, for me, why I see my clients, right, step up in a really, really big way. And I know it's got nothing to do with traditional career advice, etc. But I truly, truly see that when you do both those things, right, really, really own your magic and really, really get comfortable with how you're weird, you become unstoppable. I really mean that. You become unstoppable. It's like, the racehorse in the stable, right? The door is released and they're off. It's amazing.
It is so true for so many people that have, if you find yourself in a place where somebody gives you a compliment and you immediately discard it as being, unreasonable or unreal.
It can't be true because they don't know how I suck,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
This, I think, is one of those first symptoms of, step 1, realize that you've got a problem. Step 2, let's make a plan.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this ability to lead by example in sharing these things. I know I think I've mentioned before, if you asked me 5 years ago, the idea of getting up and doing an online show like this every week, and it's been 2.5 years, I would have thought I was crazy because, the idea that it helps other people is really the thing that helped me get over it, right? And this idea that, look, I'm going to share some things that people don't like. Well, okay, I guess I get to say that I don't care if they don't like it because other people do. And I'm here to serve them, not those. And this kind of idea of being okay with other people thinking that some, I love skiing, but if for some reason there's some, like, I'm probably at the weird end of having as many different pairs of skis as I do and spending as much time as I can out all the kinds of skiing. But I mean, some people would think, well, that's ridiculous because that's cold. I'm like, yeah, well, I melt in the heat. So guess what? You go keep your beach vacation. I'm going to go do this instead. And I love the advice and I celebrate the advice so much because it's impossible to build the influence when you're playing from fear, when you're playing small, when you're holding yourself back from even thinking that it's possible that you could create that change or be the person that would create that change. And so I just want to celebrate all of those leaders like you that are out there that are helping people open their eyes and see this is possible, but you probably have some work to do on yourself to be ready to do that. But guess what? You can do that.
Yeah.
And it takes work, but like pick your heart. Keep playing small or do this hard thing to get to the other side of that hard work to become the person that's going to make the change in the world to leave it a better place.
Couldn't agree more. And I think you raised such an important point, and it's literally like it's essential to everything that I do, which is you talked about serving others. And I think especially for women, because that's, my square centimeter in this world, right? I focus on women. Um, we as women have been raised from a young age to think about others, to be communal, right? Boys get to be selfish. They get to focus on themselves, where they stand, on the totem pole, how high up they are. A lot of what they're raised is to be leaders, right? There's constant competition, who is the fastest, strongest, etc. For girls, it's the exact opposite. We cannot put our heads above the parapet. We have to color inside the lines. Conversation is all around. My kids, they're my girls. I have two daughters. They're now a bit older, but when they were little, it's all about what do we have in common, because that's what we expect of girls, right? To focus on the communal, to focus on serving others, to focus on, you can't ask for yourself, which is incidentally why a lot of women struggle in their careers, to raise their hand to say, I am ready, I can do these things, and also I want these things for myself, right? So it's a real struggle.
Yep.
And the shift comes the moment you start thinking about this entire process, asking for yourself as an act of service. Namely, in two ways. One is, me serving at my highest level is not just great for me, it's great for the rest of the world, right? So somebody else is better off if I ask or say, I want to do these things because I'm serving them at a higher level, I'm providing more value, having more impact, etc., right? So it's good for the other person. What I teach in this communication framework, right, is to also at a sort of smaller level, almost within the conversation, to focus on the other side. So not to talk about, this is what I'm great at, this is what I want to do, this is what you want to ask me or hire me for, etc. But instead to focus wildly on the other side. So to get really curious about what are the challenges that the person that you're talking to, right, and potentially hoping to work with, and what are the challenges that they're struggling with and what are they hoping to achieve. And if you understand those 2 points, right, then you can figure out for yourself, how can I serve them, get from, overcoming those challenges and achieving those goals, right? And so what I can see for a lot of my clients is that the moment, right, for these women, it becomes not just possible, but it's like the objective is not to serve themselves, but to serve the other. It opens up this whole like, oh, okay, I can do that. In fact, I've been trained from birth for that, basically. So it's like, this is...
I've been training my whole life for this.
Exactly,
I got this.
Exactly. This is my moment. I get to shine, right? But it's like, it makes it comfortable to do it. Whereas the traditional view of career progression, right, and these conversations around career progression are all about, I gotta show off, I gotta brag, I gotta tell people what I'm great at, I've got to rub it in their face, I've got to talk about myself. And every single woman I talk to goes, I'm really great at my job, but I hate talking about it. I hate talking about how great and that is because they have these internal biases, right? From a young age, they've been told not to, basically. So they feel really uncomfortable doing it, but it's also the external biases. We expect women to play small and to not say, I can and I want to. So if they are showing up in what is traditional, this male perspective of, telling people I can do this, right? Like my nephews, my brother's got 3 boys, they constantly talk about how they're great and, who has the bigger car or whatever. Like it's this everything is matched, right? And it's okay for them to do that, but you can't ask a woman to do that. Whereas the world of work has been designed by men, and it's for men still. I mean, it's only been, 50 years that we've sort of started engaging as women, right, in that world. So we're all collectively still quite getting used to that. And so it means that as a woman, when you've got to adapt to that world and that expectation, that on the one hand says, in order to move ahead, you need to show off, you need to talk about what you're great at, that is expected. But on the other hand, penalizes women for doing exactly that, because as a woman, you're not supposed to, right? You're caught in the middle.
One of the things that I've seen very successful women leaders, and several of them work here, is they focus on, here are the outcomes that we created. And there's a language that I find men are often more likely to say I, and the women are more likely to say we. And as a leader, when you can see past that, you can see the outcomes that those leaders create consistently across things, and where the pattern of success, and then success leaves clues. And I think the outcomes that we create, the benefit that's left behind, and the people that we help along the way are, in many cases, the things that I find several of the successful women that I respect the most are able to say, here's what we've been able to accomplish. We overcame dot, 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 dot.
Hmm.
And when as a leader we can hear, here's the we overcame, right?
Hmm.
There's leadership and guidance and all of the other goodness that's in that. And just because the word
Hmm.
we is used, because it's more comfortable
Hmm.
and perhaps more acceptable in some circles,
Yeah.
that idea of here's what we overcame, here's the outcomes we created, is really the pattern that has been celebrated and helped some of those women leaders shine. I'd love your feedback on that because this is the pattern that I've noticed,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
it means that others around them need to listen and communicate just a little bit differently, but with the recognition and then the pattern of what I've seen work over and over and over again, right?
Hmm.
Is then those leaders who then have the confidence to go and say, I, right?
Yeah. I
It
mean,
can stand out even more. But there's a comfortable set of language that I've seen some very successful women use. If that's helpful for
well,
you, you probably teach it already. But I'm sharing a pattern that I've seen that I hope helps people as well.
100%. I think you're hitting the nail on the head completely. That distinction, right, between I and we. I always like talking
Yeah.
about the time where I set up, HR for Asia for this billion-dollar company, and one of the things that I did was set up this training program, and I really needed help because it was just me, and it was a really big deal, and it took a lot of time, and it like nigh on killed me. And then we were talking at the global meeting about it, right? We were all presenting, and so I presented that I'd done to about 20 of the other people in the room from all over the world. And I remember my boss sitting in front of me, texting me as I had just spoken, right, about what I had done in Asia, texting me, next time, please use a little bit more we rather than I. And I remember being so incredibly pissed off because I had begged him for support. I had asked my coworkers, could you please help me? And they hadn't. And then here I was, right, having done this, single handedly built this up, and then being penalized for claiming that. It's like, you can't have it both ways. But that was what it was expected of me as a woman. And so there is this gap between, it is a problem. As a guy, you can do this. As a woman, you cannot. The problem, Sean, with what you've just shared is that you are an enlightened human being. You see this. You look past the we and you understand there's an I there, but there's a cultural, preference for not using that term. And so deflecting or defaulting, I should say, to we. But the majority in this world is not enlightened. And so as a woman, you're still stuck with the problem of I should talk about I in order to get ahead. But when I do, I get, told off for it. So overcoming that issue, it's a pretty tricky, very narrow.
It's not easy,
No.
but I have also
Yeah.
found that there are those who vote with their feet and choose who they work for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's
Um,
ultimately what happens,
I,
right? Yeah,
I,
no, 100%.
I
I mean, the biggest reason why people leave their companies is because they don't see opportunities where they are, and the bulk of that is women who are being held back because they're doing the work and they're getting amazing results. They're just not recognized for it. Why are they not recognized for it? Because the world of work, right, the corporate world right now dictates that you have to raise your hand and you have to speak up, that great rewards are not given to the people who get those great results. They're given to the people who ask for it. And if you're not
yeah,
making that distinction and if you're not realizing that early enough as a woman, then, if you expect automatic rewards and they are not forthcoming, then yeah, you're gonna go at some point. I did a whole TEDx talk about this. It's called "Save Your Company Money, Give Your People a Raise," and it's literally about this: the idea that companies, like the attrition rates are huge, right, across the board, and every person that leaves your company costs your company between 100 and 400% of that person's annual salary in replacing them, basically. And so it's a business imperative in my book. At least there's a very good business case to be made to make sure that you obviously pay your people properly, right? For women, that's an extra sort of tricky piece, but also to give them opportunities. Anyway, I can go off on a tangent on that in that direction. But the point stands, right, that it's incredibly important for people in general and for women in particular to spend time what I call working on their careers rather than just in it, right? What I see is a lot of
Yeah.
people, they just do the work, right? 100% of the time or 150% of the time, right? They're slaving away, they're working away. And instead, they should spend some, I say 5 to 10% if you're particularly unhappy where you are, maybe 20% of your working week working on your career. So coming back to your subject of visibility, right? Creating visibility for the work and the results that you deliver, working on that, making sure that the right stakeholders know that you exist and what you can do for them, right? That's how great careers are made. Great careers are not made by doing great work. Great careers are made by doing great work and having the right people know about what you can do for them. Again,
Yeah.
now we're back at, serving others.
Creating outcomes,
Yeah, exactly.
serving others.
When you spend a small but significant still percentage of your work, making sure that the right people know how you can serve them, your career will tremendously benefit, right, from that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I'm so grateful that you've been able to spend time with us today.
It was fun.
And I know that this will go and serve quite a few. Some of those women are going to be curious how they can get in touch with you to get a little bit more one-on-one help with you.
Yep.
What would your advice for them be?
Where to find me? Well, I've got a really funny name, so that's fairly easy. Wies Bratby, Wies, and then Bratby. I don't think there's a lot of Wieses in this world anyway. So I'm on LinkedIn, mostly. That's where I hang out. My business called womenofagency.com is a fun website if you want to do a lot of reading around, the work that I do. Not so much the work that I do, but really a lot of coaching that I do via that. I've also got a podcast called Winning with Wies Bratby. That might be interesting, where you get a sneak peek of my coaching sessions, so that can be fun. Lots of different ways, but come and say hello. I think via LinkedIn there's also Instagram. I have Instagram.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can also find me there.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn is really where I
Very
hang
good.
out.
Very good.
Yeah.
Vies, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sean.
And thank you for what you're doing for so many people on this big never-ending climb that we're on for stronger supply chain and procurement. Thank you.